WP-Get Web Dev Tutorials for all user levels. Okay guys, so I promised a Facebook user that I would put this video out. I must apologise, I've been crazy busy the last couple of weeks, so I'm only just getting to it now. It is a starting point, so one of the common questions that comes up in the community is about processes. How do we manage our process with the customer? How do we keep track of where we're at and make sure that projects are running smoothly? So I've tried all sorts of things in the past. This is something new that I'm trying. It is a little bit beta for me, so it's just something I've thrown together and we're going to use over the next few projects and see how it works. And if this is the way to go, then I will improve on this process. So what I'm going to show you is what the concept is. You can then deploy it yourself if you like. What I'm using here is a build register. So in the back end, if we go to our build register, where I've got a whole bunch of fields here. So who's going to deploy the site? It'll be me. Oops. What type of deployment is it? Is it a existing site? So they've got a domain where they've got a website, so we need to build it on a dev domain. They don't have it, then we're going to deploy straight to that domain and just put it in maintenance mode so we don't have to then move it after the fact. If they have an existing site on the domain, so they've got an existing website and you're doing something new for them, we need to deploy that onto a dev domain. In our case, we use the dev-clientname.wpevolve.net, which is one of our domains. And with that, we keep it consistent as to, so we know anything that ends in the wpevolve.net, got a dev in front of it, is a client's dev domain. And then we deploy that out to our cPanel servers. So we have a internal use server and all of our dev sites go onto that. So it just keeps it clean. And in the end, what we'll do is with the dev sites, we then clone those across to their live domain to go live. So depending on what you select for the deployment type, these options, option 1.2 here change. Also, if you look down here, so if they don't have a site on this domain, we deploy straight to the domain that will be live. And we need to make sure, obviously, the name servers are pointing to the right place. We then need to check name server propagation. So I use that, well, what's my DNS.net, and then we need to make sure that it's resolving to the actual domain. And then we jump into our cPanel, we make sure we've got a auto SSL certificate, and we make sure that every single cPanel account, we make sure the domain we're using has force SSL on it. That's just to make sure that there's no way we're going to end up with mixed content. Always going to have HTTPS in front of it. And then we basically clone out the starter site, reset the admin password for that particular site, change a couple of settings in in WordPress, so basically just the site name and tag, and then we add it to our management system and stick it into maintenance mode. We then add it to our commenting system, Project Huddle, and this is pretty much all of the tasks for the deployment. And then when that deployment tech has finished it, ticks the all tasks complete. When did he complete it? In this case, we just say now, and then that's his role done. Okay, now if I hit save here, it's going to save those changes. As I move forward, I might actually change, I might add some JavaScript to this. It doesn't have a feature built in, but I'm going to add some JavaScript where it will save the changes as I make the changes rather than having to press the save button all the time. And I think that'll be a lot more likely to have less errors or mistakes. And so that's just the deployment phase. So once the deployment phase is done, we then go into our site build phase. Again, bunch of checklists. There is some stuff missing in here because as I said, this is a work in progress. Before the site build here, we need to do a discovery call. We need to figure out what the client actually wants. Have a look at some of the examples that they've given us and then come to an agreement with the client on what we're actually building before we actually build it. So I haven't actually added that in here. I might do that a little bit later. In one view, I'm looking at it and going, well, we've kind of assumed that we've done that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be at this stage anyway. So that's something else to consider. In fact, the deployment phase here, before it gets to the deployment steps here, we would already have deployed the site anyway. So it would be a matter of the technician who's going to sponsor the deployment, going through all these steps, then just ticking all these boxes to make sure he hasn't missed anything. So he might have forgotten to for example, here, if we open the existing domain, what have we got here? He might have forgotten to force SSL on cPanel. So this is just a little reminder. Oh, I missed that point. I better go and check that. Okay, so even though these are already done, because this would be the client's dev site that we're working on, and to be working on it, it must have already been deployed. So this particular section, section 1, should have already been done before we actually do this anyway. Then our discovery, site build process, go through all that. Our first stage in our process of building, to make sure we've got all the logos and graphics and everything we need from the customer. We've defined that, we've defined the fonts, we've created our style guide. So every one of our sites starts with a style guide. We actually have a page for that, so that we can make sure that it's the site actually is compliant with the style guide, and that gives the customer a style guide that they can actually refer to as well. So we do a build, we then go through a process we haven't got in here, which is making sure the customer's happy. We then do the final build, and then we say all the tasks are complete for that. And when was that completed? Now. All right, now that that is done, we then go to our quality assurance stage. Now, our policy is that we use the same text for building and for quality assurance, but the tech who does the quality assurance check has to be a different tech to the person that built the site for obvious reasons. So who's going to QA it? When is it going to be QA'd? They've checked all the style guide, layout and spacing, general check for typos, make sure all the forms have the correct email addresses, actions and messages. If it's got WooCommerce, make sure there's a flow. Again, I've got to add to this as I work on it, but this is just a starting point. So the QA tech's gone, yep, that's all good. Chatted with the client, said, okay, I'm happy with this. Client's gone, yep, that's all good. So now we've completed all those tasks. Okay. So then we have a go live and handover. So the go live is, this would be if it is on the, let's go back up here. So if we're deploying to the to a dev domain, so they don't have an existing site. Sorry, they don't have an existing site, so we're deploying to the domain it will be live on. Options down here will be very simple. We just disable the maintenance mode, rename the client, so remove our AA dev in front of the client. We do that in Manage WP so that it groups all of our dev sites together. And once you take the AA dev off, it then just goes in alphabetical order with the rest of the sites. So this just keeps it grouping really good. Manage WP unfortunately doesn't have a way of grouping apart from favorites, and we've got some other stuff we put in favorites, so that's our method for doing that. We enable our standard Manage WP services. We add the site to an existing or new WP Manage WP client. So that would be the person who's going to get the monthly reports, and then we enable all the scheduled updates and client reports for that customer. That's our management system done, and it's taken out of maintenance mode. And then we basically enable our licenses that we didn't have licensed while we're actually working on the site. Do a cleanup, make sure our email is sending out correctly, make sure we remove anything that's not being used, any plugins and themes, keep it nice and clean, log out of it, and do a final check, just making sure everything's okay, no errors in Chrome DevTools, etc. Customer notified that it's all ready to go, all tasks done, and the go live time. Okay, so that's our process. Now, what we will do is that if this is a effective process, because this is an options page, JetEngine's options page, down the track, if we decide we want to have a centralized management system for this, which we currently don't have, what we can do is we can add some REST endpoints, and we can pull from this and go, maybe we just might pull these last fields here. So the task is completed and when was it completed for initial deployment, and maybe who did it. And we can have a management dashboard where it's going, okay, for this domain, a client.com domain, this is the person who's deploying it, and they've completed it and on this time. So, then we can pull from the site build, who's the person doing the site build, when was it completed and at what time. And we can show that on a single page as a chart and where we're at with each of our projects. So what we would do is on the actual site, we would tick these boxes, fill in the details, and then in a management dashboard, we can see exactly where we're at with it. So that's the intention if we proceed down this road. We've got to try it out and make sure it works for us. Now, how do we get to this? So we use a JetEngine, so that's by Crockoblock, options page. So options page is here, in our build register, and just the basic details for a typical options page here. Now fields, we add accordion, so the first one here, so one initial deployment, accordion. We have all our fields in here, so the site deployed by is a text field. The deployment type is a radio with these two options. And then we get down to, I'm just going to skip through all those. And with the options pages, what you do is when you get to the end of accordion, you just add a end endpoint. So it's just a endpoint type instead of a field. So that groups them into these accordions. So it knows which fields inside here start and then where they end. So it's pretty simple, and it's a really clean way where anyone who's access to or working on the site go in there and they can have a look at where we're at, and eventually you can put that onto a dashboard if you want to. So this is a really good way of doing it for as far as I can see. We do have to try it in the real world and see how well it works. But what I will do is I will export what I've got here and I'll make it available so you can use it as a starting point. I will reiterate, this is the process that we use. Your process might be different, like you might need to buy hosting, you might need to set up staging sites, whatever process you use. We have all our own dedicated servers, so we either deploy it to a live domain on that server or we deploy it to a dev domain. We work on it and then we deploy it to the live domain when we're finished. But it's all on our own servers, so we can do that internally. So our processes might be different to yours, but this is a good way of figuring out what you need to do. And what I would suggest you do is that if you use this process on your site or your starter site, which is what this is, I'm actually looking at our starter site, as you decide, okay, I need some more information here, or I need to reword these and make them more clear as to what they're supposed to be, edit them on your starter site. So when you clone them, you've got all those changes there. All right, so that's pretty much that. I will export the options page as I've got it, so you can use it if you want to. And in JetEngine, basically, when you go into JetEngine, you've got a skins manager. It's a strange name, and you've got export and import. So what I'll do is I'll export this, which would be my options page. I'll export that, and if you want to use it, you basically go to import and then find that file, and then you'll end up with this build register options page. So it's a pretty simple way of doing it. It took me a little while to find this in the first place because a skins manager didn't sound like something for options pages and post types and all that sort of stuff, but it works, and it is definitely something that's going to save you some time. So I hope that's useful to you and you get some value out of this. Thank you.